He said, "여름방학 재밌었어요? Did you have a good summer vacation?" And she said, "네, 너는?"
I don't
Isn't
think
that funny?
she
And
got the
now,
honorifics wrong.
the average American wouldn't understand. Hello, everyone. This is Mark Peterson. Today, I am at the Korea Society, and we are going to cut several short videos introducing important topics that we hope classroom teachers can use in their classroom instruction. Hello, everyone. This is Mark Peterson. Today, I'm at the Korea Society, and I have a guest today, is Stephanie. And Stephanie works here. Stephanie, what do you do here?
I'm the Development Program Associate here.
Oh, great. And we're going to talk about Korean literature.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to talk about old and new literature. Do you have a question or two to get us started?
Yeah, definitely. So I was wondering, literature always reflects the times, right? So I was wondering what you thought about the historical development of Korean literature as it relates to the history of Korea.
Yeah, literature does certainly reflect the times. And one of the things that's really interesting about Korean literature is very often it's authorless. You don't know who wrote it. Look at the famous stories of Korean literature. Chunhyang, the story of the faithful wife, and Shimchung, the blind man's daughter, and Hungbu, the good brother as opposed to the bad brother. These are the three most famous stories. Then there's the Hongildong story, the kind of Robin Hood figure. These are the old pre-modern stories, and we don't know who wrote them.
Oh, wow.
They don't put their name on it. And I think the reason for that is they were probably written by Yangban or lower level Yangban, the Hyangni. We think the Hyangni wrote some of these. But these stories, you don't put your name on it because serious scholars don't deal in fantasy and storytelling. And so a serious scholar couldn't put his name on it because he'd be ridiculed for not, doing something serious. So Korean literature has this interesting tradition that much of its literature originally was authorless. And then when you get into the 20th century, you have a new revolution. And the 20th century was dominated by short stories. But the 20th century was not happy for Korea. Korea was dominated by the Japanese, divided, Korean War. And so the short stories, like short stories in English tend to be rather tragic. There's a tendency for these stories in French and in English as well to be tragic stories. And so the short story fit the Korean population. As you say, that the times is reflected in the literature. And then as we come into the more modern age, you see full books written and you see movies based on some of these books. And then we cross the ocean and we come to America. Have you read some of these Korean American stories?
Yeah, definitely a few.
Yeah, which ones do you like?
Well, I've read The Vegetarian. I wrote my thesis on Han Kong, who's a South Korean author, so it's not Korean American literature. On Such a Full Sea, Chang Rae-lee, a ton of really good contemporary Korean American authors.
My favorite story by Korean American author is Still Life with Rice.
Oh.
It's a story of a young woman who discovers the story of her grandmother. Her grandmother lived in the 20th century, went through all of the deprivations, the Japanese occupation, the liberation, the Korean War. And this young Korean American in LA who says she wanted to be blonde and be a cheerleader, didn't pay any attention to her grandmother. And then she sat down with her one day after she graduated from college and, "Grandmother, tell me what your life was like." And she was just blown away by the things that her grandmother had gone through. And she wrote it up, and it was a bestseller. It's one of the first Korean American bestseller novels. Native Speaker is another one we can recommend to the audience. It's a good high school level modern story dealing with the life of a Korean American. So in the classroom, a lot of these Korean American stories, and you mentioned Vegetarian is not Korean American, but it was translated and it won a lot of prizes. It was a major story. These stories can describe the life and times of Koreans in the modern world and Korean Americans. So they're great stories. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Oh, awesome. And speaking of translation, what do you think international readers should keep in mind when they're trying to understand Korean culture through translated literature?
Yeah, they say that in translation you lose a lot,
Mm.
and that's unavoidable. But on the other hand, translation sometimes really captures the original idea. And you know, the Nobel Prize winners are almost all translated. These days, they're almost all from foreign language sources. So, yeah, reading literature in translation is a very valuable way of learning about Korean culture in the case of Korea and other cultures in the case of other Nobel Prize winners. That's true.
So, something that I'm curious on your thoughts are because I grew up with my family speaking Korean, and I know that a lot of Korean culture is understood through language, like how we speak in different honorific levels. So, I was wondering what you thought about Korean language and how that contributes to Korean storytelling.
Yeah, that's a very good point because when you talk about culture, any culture, the key element, the most important element of any culture is the language.
Mm-hmm.
Language embodies culture. You can't speak a language without understanding the culture. And in the Korean case, you've got these honorifics and different levels of speech that are so hard for Americans to understand. These days, we've got a great influx of students learning Korean because of the K-pop movement and the K-movie movement. And there are students that are coming into the courses at my university who already speak Korean just a little bit. And there was a funny case. A teacher at the beginning of the course asked the students in Korean, did you have a good summer vacation? He was asking different students and different questions. He asked this one young female student who knew Korean from the movies. He said, 여름방학 재밌었어요? Did you have a good summer vacation? And she said, 네, 너는?
I don't
Isn't
think
that
she
funny?
she
And
got the
now,
honorifics wrong.
the average American wouldn't understand why Stephanie is laughing at this, but you don't say nonen.
Right.
That's a low form of you. You don't say nonen to the professor.
Mhm.
But this student had learned that through movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Learned that no is you, and she didn't worry about it. And so I appreciate you laughing the way you did, because that's the way people laugh when I tell them that story, because it is so funny.
Mm.
And the Americans wouldn't understand it because you don't understand, but it's like the teacher saying, did you have a good vacation? You say, yeah, how about you? You know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just a low form of response. But
Mhm.
she didn't know any better.
Mhm.
She was just responding. And the TA was telling me the story, and he said that the professor kind of swallowed, like, my goodness, what do I do? But he didn't do anything about it. He didn't criticize her or chastise her or anything like that. But because he knew it was not insulting. It would have been if the person knew Korean.
Mhm.
So yeah, language really conveys a lot, which makes it difficult to translate it a lot because you've got all these levels that are working at it. But it's worth the reward. It's worth it to read these stories, and we love the stories of Korean literature, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any other recommendations? I definitely want to check out Still Rice.
Still Life, Still Life with Rice. I really enjoy that one. There are quite a number of new writers that I'm behind on. I need to catch up on them. So yeah, let's you and me both catch up.
Okay,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's some recommendations for the classroom. Still Life with Rice and Han Gong's work, Vegetarian, and some others. So there's some homework for you. And I want to thank Stephanie for coming in today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We'll see you.